Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Daniel G. Garza, and this is another episode of Putting Together Conversations. Welcome to the show. Putting Together Conversations is a show about folks, where they come from, where they are now, and what their journey has been like. And the idea is to motivate and inspire others to go after their dreams and their goals. And I hope that my guest today inspires and motivates you. For those of you watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube, thank you for watching. You're welcome to join in the conversation. So make sure that you go into the conversation so that you can post your questions and or comments. I want to start by, as usual, reading the bio. My guest today is a good friend of mine, Mr. Brendan McCall. Brendan McCall is a movement artist, educator, and writer who divides his time between New York City and Oslo. His work in contemporary dance, physical theater, and performance art have appeared on 5 continents. He freelances as a producer for Carrie Hoas Productions in Norway, Nila Kornatova. Why did he give me all these complicated names? And Dance Tactics here in the US. In the past, he has also been the producer for Grusum Hettens, I'm sure he's going to correct me, theater, the manager of the Cummings Theater in Australia, and production manager for Tulsa Ballet. Hey, I knew that one. Brendan's writing has appeared in numerous media outlets and have been translated into French, Norwegian, Russian, and Belarusian. He is currently the lead writer for Arts Independent. Since 1984, he has taught at numerous universities and institutions with long-term appointments at the Yale School of Drama, the School of Drama, New York University, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, the Atlantic Theater Company Acting School, Bilkent University, Danskogland, the International Theater Academy in Norway and Oslo, where he also served as rector from 2008 through 2010, along with Paul Langland and Brenna Palughi. I hope I said that right. He's the co-founder of the Allan Wayne Work Alliance, an experimental alignment technique he has been teaching for nearly 30 years, and is also a designated instructor for the Jean Hamilton Floor Ballet and Mary Olivier Six Viewpoints. He has a BFA with honors from the New University with MFA and Bellington College. Whoa! Did I say any of that right? I hope I said some of those right, because I swear that's
absolutely, that was great.
That was more difficult than my citizenship test. I swear, it was just like.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. How are you, sir? Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's great to be here.
Now, for everybody who listens or watches the show of how we met, Brendan and I met through one of the programs that's put together by the Actors Fund here in Los Angeles. And we were put together into a group. And curiously enough and interesting enough, the whole group became pretty much friends. We've all stayed in touch afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the silver linings of the past 16 months was that there's a lot of organizations that have been shifting from live into virtual. And I think the Actors Fund has done a great job to help performing artists and entertainment professionals to just stay connected, stay in the process, and get through this.
Yeah, and we actually, I should have pulled up the picture, but Brendan had a chance to be here in LA a couple of weeks ago, and we were able to meet up and hang out, and which I'm going to say, it was such an interesting evening that there was this connection between all of us at the little group. There was 5 of us that met up for dinner at a place where he was staying, and the highlight of the evening was that 2 people that we had no clue knew each other, and I was like, oh wow, this is so magical.
Yeah, it really is a small world. Like, I think there's about 50 people in the arts business, and like, you know, if we're lucky, we can get to know those 50 people because there's so many connections. But yeah, someone else.
Pardon me a second. I lost my hearing here. Let me fix this. Can you jump back in for a second, babe? Give me just a second there.
No problem.
There we go. I'm going to take these off. I apologize to everybody. Can you hear me, Brendan? Can you say something? Can you speak?
I can hear you just fine. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, I'm having trouble hearing you. Live TV, yes, exactly. I apologize for this.
No problem.
Okay, and we're back, everyone, with Christian's Put It Together conversations. Can you mute yours? My goodness, you didn't do it. Okay, it's going to be weird for a minute. I apologize, Brendan, for whatever's going on. I'm not quite sure, and I know.
That's okay.
I wanted to ask a real quick question. I saw there's a reference to floor bar, and if I'm correct,
Yes.
that's a ballet exercise, right? Wow. Now,
yes, there's a number. Yeah, there's a number of floor bar systems out there. The one that I've been studying I first started studying in 1993 and then started teaching in 2000 was it's in the tradition of this American named Gene Hamilton, who had a fascinating career starting from the 19th century, was part of the Ballet Russe, was a vaudevillian, was a modern dancer, and she put together this floor bar in Midtown Manhattan starting in the 40s. The studio that she rented was neighbors with Joseph Pilates, so I would be fascinated to know what those conversations were like. But it survived to this day because of people like Mary Overlie and Wendell Beavers, who are my teachers at NYU. And I just got really excited about it and have been able to teach it in the States and abroad and also online during this pandemic. And it's a wonderful system. It's incredibly logical, it's intelligent, it's fun, and anyone can do it. So if people want to know more about it, feel free to write to me and I can tell you all about it.
Well, and so you're a ballet dancer yourself then, correct?
No, I started dancing late. Except for doing musicals when I was in high school, which I don't know if that counts. I mean, it was fun, but there wasn't any formal education really until I moved to New York and started studying at NYU as an acting major.
Wow.
But all the movement classes that we had were from professional dancers, and I got very excited by what were the so-called postmodern or contemporary dance modalities that I was being exposed to. And at that time, which was the early 90s, I mean, it was a very exciting moment in terms of what was happening in New York and what was happening in live performance and a lot of things I'd never heard of. Like I had never seen dance as an improvisational performance. I had no idea. I'd never heard of dance theater outside of a musical context. So I was just fired up and excited. And it seemed like the message from my teachers was go out and do your own work. Like don't just audition for other people's plays, other people's projects, do your own thing. And I thought everyone was doing that. I'm like, all right, here we go. And that was, 28 years ago. And I'm still finding a way to do that. So I've been very fortunate. I'm very, very grateful.
Oh my goodness. That's incredible. Yeah. And it looks like our regular scheduled host is back and maybe fully functional. But I find that incredible. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. I love that your story includes I didn't start when I was 6 years old. That I started at a later time in my life. That it's a wonderful message.
Absolutely. Some of the best things in my life were not intended.
Okay, are you? Sure. No, come back. I'm ready to go back to being a guest. But thank you very much, Brendan. Did I see that?
Yeah, thank you, Christian.
Yes.
Live television, folks, thank you for joining us. If you're just joining us, this is Put It Together Conversations. My guest today is Brenda McCall, and we're talking about dancing. I apologize for missing the first 10 minutes of the conversation, but I could hear Christian, but I couldn't. Anyway, technicalities, folks. Thank you for bearing with us. But we do have a question on the board for you. How big of an influence was Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers on your career?
At the time when I was starting out, I would say very little next to none. When I went to New York City, I really thought I was going to be some brooding, serious method actor, because that's what I thought being a successful actor was. Like, you'd had to be very intense and have terrible posture and very gloomy all the time. And that was my goal for going to New York City. And thankfully, I got out of that stereotype and actually found what I'm really interested in, which was a more creative and poetic use of the body with theatrical elements and a sense of doing original work. So it was only later in life that I started to kind of go backwards through dance history from all sorts of styles. But I never really thought of Fred Astaire as being a model for me. I just thought, like, he's brilliant, but there's no way I would ever try to emulate that kind of a career path.
Right. Was there something in your career that, maybe Christian already asked this, I apologize if I repeat it, but were there people that you looked at and you said, okay, my strategy is to get to that level or that place?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few. I mean, I think, gosh, where to start? I mean, I think, when I went to high school, I didn't want to go to my high school. It was a Jesuit boys' school in San Jose, California. A lot of people in my family went to this school, the boys, obviously. And, but I wanted to go to the public high school that was co-ed because I was in the band in my junior high school. So I really thought, I'm going to be a musician or something. I didn't really have a clear idea. So I was very rebellious at 14 that my parents wanted me to go to this Jesuit boys' school. I thought, that's so square and so awful. But I didn't have any choice in the matter. I was 14. I went there. I mean, and there was I checked out the music program and I thought it was terrible. So I only went into drama because they had auditions. And I thought, well, this will be something. I'm not an athlete. I'll try this. And I was immediately hooked. I felt like all the people I wanted to hang out with and all the people I wanted to be were there. But I still didn't think of it as a profession. It was a community and it was a scene that felt where I could just be myself. And it was only around my junior year that the director of that program, Tom Alessandri, said, you can make a career out of this. And I had never thought about that. But it took someone that I respected who took an interest in me to give me the idea that, well, if that's true, how would I do that? And I asked him, like, what do I do? What do you suggest? And he says, get out of San Jose, California, go to New York City. That's where all the serious actors go. And I said, okay. And I looked at NYU. It seemed like a really good school. I'd never been to New York City. And I was late to my audition because I went to the wrong place. They had auditions in San Francisco. I went to the graduate NYU auditions, which, getting there early, totally wrong place. So I ran to the correct place for the undergraduate, burst into the room when the chair of the department was in the middle of giving a lecture about Tisch. And I said, is this the undergraduate acting auditions? And he must be Brendan McCall. And I went, oh my God, I totally blew it. And I auditioned scholarship. And that's the only way I could afford to go, that and student loans. And that changed my life. So it's very much a kind of wayward journey. It's not, and then once I got there, I thought I'm going to be, Robert De Niro #2 or Dustin Hoffman #2 or something. And but I got really excited by the so-called experimental theater and experimental dance happening in New York. It just blew my mind, and I thought, oh wow, that's what I want to do. And so had to change course again. And I feel like that's been the theme in my life, is just change again, start over again. And I feel like that's one thing that I feel is so valuable in any profession, but especially as an artist, is the ability to start again.
The one thing that I find interesting about your story so far is that for those of us who are in entertainment or in arts, like it's in you, but you don't know that it's like, okay, this is the path that I want to go. It's just something like, oh, I like to sing, I like to dance, I like to play an instrument. But then somehow the right people or the right situations will be placed in front of you. And for some of us, it's early on that you're like, that's what I want to do. And then for some of us, it's like later in life, you're like, oh, so that wasn't just a hobby or extracurricular at school. This was something that I was supposed to do. And that's why I felt so lost for so many years. So did you feel like you belonged early on?
Well, I think that's definitely a part of it, is that sense of belonging. And I feel, I feel like my life full of travel and moving, sometimes not voluntary. And, but through the course of that, I've been able to work with a lot of people and stay connected with a lot of people all over the world. And that to me is one of the greatest elements of being an artist, in performance anyway, is the ability to make these relationships with people. It's not so much about the paycheck. I mean, of course, being paid is important and something that I require, because work is work, and people should pay for any artistic endeavor, in my opinion. And but I think it's not just about the paycheck at the sacrifice of having a positive process. And I think what constitutes a positive process takes intention, and it takes consciousness. And some companies and groups I've worked with really got that fluency in how to make a process which is characterized by keynotes of respect and communication and transparency, and some don't, because the arts are rather renowned for being a hotbed of dysfunction and unregulated ways of working. So it's definitely not for the thin-skinned or the faint of heart, and it's not an equal, just profession by any means. It's tough, and it's rife with uncertainty, but I'm just nuts. I have to do it. I have to do creative things. I don't know how to be straight. I just have to be this. And I take a little bit of comfort with, people like Carl Jung. Some consider him the greatest mind of the 20th century, or at least one of. And he said, the two people that seem to be immune to my psychoanalysis that I just can't seem to understand are alcoholics and artists. And with the artists, he said, I don't understand how these people can sacrifice so much of their lives for this profession, which materially gives them so very little in return on average. I mean, it's an incredibly brutal, challenging kind of profession. So you have to be a little weird to want to make a full-time career as an artist, which I think is different than just being creative as a hobby. I think everyone should be creative, period. But if you want to dedicate your life or your profession to it, you have to be a little different.
Well, now that you mentioned the challenges that come with that, and after reading your bio and everything that you've accomplished, were you always very confident in taking on that next challenge?
Oh man. You know, I think it was Winston Churchill who said that experience comes from wisdom and wisdom comes from a lot of failures or something like that. And I'm still trying to cultivate the optimism and the enthusiasm to envision the future. I think it's just that I've had enough failures and setbacks in my life that I have more confidence that somehow everything will be okay. But that doesn't mean that I'm always leaping into the new day with lots of vim and vigor by any means. There's definitely been moments of total despair, total frustration, and feeling stuck because, um, you know, especially in live performance, it's a matrix of a lot of different people and a lot of different forces working together to make the thing, whether it's a dance, a play, a tour, whatever. And so many things can not go the way you hope for, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's very challenging to just roll with. It's not like I have the kind of status or the power where like nothing affects me. I'm bulletproof. It's not like that at all. So it's just about how do I go through this with as much, calm, equanimity, dignity, peace. And I feel like I get better and better, but it's definitely tough. And I think, the confidence comes from allies around us, or around me anyway, who can give me a reality check, to give me a shoulder to lean on, who will listen to my woes and give me that renewal of energy to try again, start over.
Gotcha. I think a perfect example of rolling with whatever happens is today's episode. We started in that direction. Uh, another
Yeah.
question. Another question in the realm of challenges. Is it challenging to be a male dancer?
I mean, I think just being a dancer of any kind is, in the States anyway, is challenging. I think it's more competitive for women, for sure. There's just exponentially more women studying dance and practicing professional dance than men. So in some ways, it's easier. Some of the roles in dance are, for men, are not always that interesting. It's definitely, if you want to show off your virtuosity, I think there's a lot more for women. I think that's starting to change in the last 10 years, though. And I think it's still a problem in terms of like leadership positions. Like, it's definitely, like every profession, much more of a male-dominated society. And so how to crack through that culture takes generations. And I think we're in a moment where that's still continuing to be confronted beyond just a cosmetic fix or a superficial shift. I think I definitely had a lot to catch up on starting so late, because I started when I was a undergraduate in college. And, there's definitely things I knew even at the time, like I'll never be able to do a lot of things as a dance artist. So my strategy was to make my own work so then I could make my own choreography and put myself in it, so that way I'm showcasing what I can do, what I'm interested in. That was my solution. And from time to time, I would get to work with other choreographers, which was great. And there were other opportunities for other companies that I auditioned for and got close, but never got the job. And maybe that would have changed if I had started younger, or I don't know if maybe that would be it. I don't know if I could have worked any harder, but I think dancers, like, it's a serious profession, especially with forms like ballet, where there's not as much room for original creation of your own movement vocabulary. I mean, you're in a classical tradition which spans hundreds of years. So part of the game in classical dance is you have to just know that language, period, in your body. And that was something that I never could do as a performer, but I have tremendous respect for those that can, because it's serious. And I think any dancer that pursues a path, whether it's for a great artist like Merce Cunningham or Alvin Ailey or Trisha Brown or Stephen Petronio, like, these are super genius, creative people, and the work demands a exceptional level of precision, virtuosity, grace, stamina, and so that's all you do. I think I just never would have fit in that, because I'm kind of nomadic and I'm kind of weird. I make my own stuff, and you don't really have the ability to do that if you're a full-time member of a dance company.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned creating your own stuff. That is not something that I thought. Like, for instance, as an actor, we're used to hearing that. It's like, well, if they're not going to cast you, write it, which is what I've done with my shows. Like, if nobody's going to hire me to host a show, I'll create my own show. But I never translated that to dancing, which is really interesting. Let me just remind everybody, for those of you watching this Put It Together Conversations, my guest today is dancer Brendan McCall, and we're talking about creating your own dances, fitting in or not fitting in, whichever fits for you. And I want to thank the folks commenting. And thank you, James, for joining us. If you have any questions or comments for any of our friends on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, please post them in your comments, and I will make sure that Brendan sees them. Is it tougher as you get older to continue in the form of dancing, or do you just keep creating more stuff for yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't dance full time anymore. I mean, I never really had I was never a member of a company full time, so I was always doing my own work and dancing in my own work as well as with other companies. I guess these would be called pickup companies, where the choreographer would assemble an ensemble of performers for that project, and then some may work with that choreographer again over time. But it seems like more and more in the States, that's the model for most companies, because it's very expensive to have a full-time dance company, from not only paying the dancers a real wage, but also just rehearsal space, all the design team, music rights, touring. It's a different model that is can be challenging financially. So it seems like more and more dancers are project to project or in a number of different pickup companies simultaneously, as well as having some kind of full-time job, whether it's as a teacher or educator, a yoga instructor, maybe bartending, waiting tables, like anything that has that ability to be somewhat flexible, but give you some income. And I started about, 12, 13 years ago, shifting more into managing and tour management, producing both my own work as well as other people's work, as a kind of way to shift, because back then I was in my early to mid 30s, and I was like, I'm not dancing full time. It's like it's a different kind of commitment to do, and I love dancing as a guest from time to time, but most of my life these days is in education or in producing. So, as well as, and also writing about performance. But I'm almost 50, so I don't perform to the same frequency that I did when I was younger. So I think unless you are if you have like the resources to do it more often, I mean, wonderful. But it seems like my career has taken this kind of a shift in the last decade or so.
I've always had this question, for instance. I'm a huge fan, and Christian and I both are huge fans of shows like So You Think You Can Dance. Um, what kind of impact do dancing shows like So You Think You Can Dance, Dancing with the Stars, all of those shows, do they have an impact in the dance community? And if so, is it positive or negative?
That's a great question too. I think, I was at this conference a couple of years ago in Montreal, actually, where that came up because this producer was doing a festival for contemporary dance, which had like a few hundred people attending. But then when he would talk about So You Think You Could Dance, like it would have like thousands of people looking at that clip and looking at that link. And it seems like that becomes the reference point of like, oh, you're a dancer. Have you been on television? And I think it's a similar analogy to, oh, you're an actor. Have you been on fill in the gap for the name of the latest Marvel or Star Wars movie? As if you're not in the Marvel Universe number 17,000, you're not really an actor. And I think that's too bad. Or like maybe Broadway, maybe. But I think there's a huge universe of working actors, working dancers that don't fit into those categories. And it might be hard to have some folks in the public, especially our friends and family, understand that. Because I think it's still in this model of, well, if it's worth doing, you should be making like gazillions of dollars doing it. And I think most artists are not making gazillions of dollars. In fact, there's a greater likelihood that you or I would play like professional basketball next week than getting that kind of financial success as an actor or a dancer. It's like statistically, it's nuts. Doesn't mean that no one should do it anyway. But I think we should be realistic about what the profession really is, not just what we think it is or the mythology of what it used to be or might be or all that stuff. It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's definitely complicated.
I relate it somewhat to when somebody makes it big all of a sudden, like a new face on a huge film, and they're like, fresh to the business. It's like, no, I've been working for years. This just finally gave me a big name. Because I feel like for a lot of us, when people started really discovering Putting Together Conversations and Little Mexican Productions, the Kristen Daniels show, they're like, oh my God, welcome to entertainment. I'm like, no, I've been hosting for 15 years. It's just you didn't know my name before this. But I've been here. Like, hello, I've been here.
Totally.
What has been, and this could be personal, professional, what do you consider being your greatest achievement so far in your life?
Oh, my daughter, number one. Absolutely. No question. I mean, I have a beautiful kid. She's 8 going on 15. And she's the greatest. I'm so moved and humbled that I get to be her dad, and that, she's her own person. She, at least right now, she has absolutely no interest in pursuing acting beyond like being a YouTuber. That's her goal, is to be a YouTuber. And I'm like, go for it. If that's your jam, why not? And but she does love dance. She loves gymnastics. She loves seeing art. She loves dance, theater, film, visual art, especially photography, reading. So that is definitely the greatest thing in my life. I feel like that's, everything else is kind of secondary to that since she was born. And I think professionally, though, I feel like it's I don't know. I don't know if there's like one particular project, I feel like just the fact that I get to keep doing this at 49 is a real gift. That I have the opportunity to do the things that ignite my imagination. I get to learn while I'm working. I get to travel from time to time, more during non-coronavirus times, but hopefully that will return more in the future. I get to try things, and I mean, every project I get to initiate, I feel like is a series of questions that I'm trying to answer for myself. It's almost like a prompt or a catalyst just to get me going. And then by the end of the project, I feel like I have a new set of questions that will then lead me to whatever next I get to do. So I feel like it's it's an exciting profession. It's not always stable, definitely not. It's not always calm, but I've been able to do this pretty consistently since January of 1994. So I'm like, why not? Let me just keep on doing this crazy stuff.
So you brought up travel, which I feel like you're answering all my dancing curiosity questions right now, the things that I've always thought about but never asked. Talking about travel and being in different countries, is dance universal, or does it have a different language depending on what country you're in?
Oh yeah, I mean everybody loves to dance. I think everybody loves to dance, and I think it's definitely universal in the sense that it feels good. It's social. It's communal. It's a way for people to just come together. It's like music. It's the most ancient of art forms. Like music, dance, storytelling. I mean, that's really it. That's what we've been doing since we emerged out of the primordial ooze. I think in terms of like taking those kinds of, every dance and every culture, of course, is informed by its culture, which is never homogenous. It's always a confluence of forces from aesthetic, history, politics, tradition, innovation. There's always so many things at play, and I think as a foreigner or a traveler, it might be challenging to decode what are those things. And there's inevitably things that I will never be able to perceive as an outsider. Like in Japan, I've been able to study Buto with a variety of people, including a couple of people who created Buto, but I will never know the depths of Buto as a non-Japanese person. There's just certain elements to it that are so indigenous that they will always elude me. And that's fine. I mean, that's, I think, the way culture works. Just as I think, in America, like jazz is such a homegrown American art form. Contact improvisation is such a American homegrown art form. And that's fine. I think the key is to just understand, what are these things and follow your interest there, because then the world becomes a very wondrous place. And your ticket to travel is your curiosity and your interest in learning. I think that's the thing that artists can do, or I encourage artists to do, is just get interested and get curious about things rather than just staying in one's comfort zone or one's own field of familiarity.
Because I danced as a kid. The first time I was ever on stage dancing, I was in kindergarten and grade school, and they walked in and said, "We're having a Cinco de Mayo pageant. Who wants to do the cucaracha?" And I was like, "Right here." I didn't know what I was doing, but they were like, "You get to leave the classroom." I'm right there. And then I danced all the way through high school. In junior high, I was part of the folkloric dance group in school, and it was 3 years. It was extracurricular, and it was intense. Like it was hard work, but I relate to what you say, because during those times, and even for a while there, like I could hear music from different regions of Mexico, and I knew where it was from. I could show you a dance move from that area. Of course, now I can't do it anymore, folks, but it was so ingrained in us that we heard a song, you're like, oh, that's from this area. This is the step you can do for that, and you had it. Of course, now I can't do it anymore. But everybody, but when we had the big meetups, all the kids, we knew the steps, and no matter what costume you were wearing, you heard a song and everybody danced the same song, and you were like, yeah, that's how you do this. Make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's part of the joy through any kind of artistic expression, is like it activates different parts of ourselves. Doing these movements just doing movement, period. That's not just standing, sitting, walking, is so exciting and so fun. And being able to express ourselves physically in a way that is playful, that is in partnership with other people, that is to music, and then we're going to share it with a audience. It's like planning a surprise party. I mean, it's a fun, joyous activity.
You mentioned COVID, the lockdown. I mean, how can we not talk about it? But how, as a dancer, how did that affect you when you're stuck in your own space?
Yeah, it was really bad. Most of my work is as a freelancer, which means it's not like I have a full-time company that is hiring me to either teach or produce other people's works. So I was living in New York City. I just moved back 6-7 months to New York City after not living in the US for 12 plus years due to personal reasons. So I was making a new start and sharing an apartment, and I was teaching part-time at a university in New York. But most of my work was as a producer, as a tour manager. So these are things that take at least a year to set up, from letter of intent, applying for grants, applying for visas, contracts, all this stuff to set it up for the live performances. So this was supposed to be a very wonderful spring and summer of 2020. And once we went into lockdown in New York, within 10 days, 75% of my income instantly gone, which means I can't afford my apartment, which means I got to move out in April in COVID. So a friend, God bless her, let me stay in a suddenly vacant Airbnb apartment that she had in Brooklyn for 3 weeks. And then I rented another apartment in Inwood for 2 months. But at that time, none of us knew, like, well, how long is this going to last? And so I was, for the first time in my life, I'm on unemployment. I'm trying to figure out how to not be completely terrified and depressed. I'm hearing sirens 24 hours a day, especially when I was living in Brooklyn. And then also hearing from people, oh no, this is just a hoax. This isn't really happening. And I'm like, please come to New York City for a weekend and let me show you the nurses and doctors. We're not kidding around. This is real. And why do people have to be sick and die before you get that? So my cousins here in Fremont, Laura and Elena, God bless them, they said, please come here. Just come back to California, stay in our guest room. And I said, absolutely. So I got on a plane and flew out here. And there's a travel ban, so I couldn't see my daughter, who lives with her mother in Oslo. So we couldn't see each other for almost 9 months, which was extremely difficult. And thank goodness for Zoom and email and every other kind of electronic communication to make it a little more bearable. And I've learned a lot. I mean, I've been doing a lot of work virtually. I've had some opportunities to teach online, both at the university that I'm still at, as well as my own DIY workshops and classes, which has been very helpful. And there's been some freelance stuff, here or there that has also supplemented my income. But, it's been tough. It's tough now too, 16 months later, to, I think, accurately predict, well, what is the future? Because things are not the same. There's no going back to normal. Normal wasn't necessarily that great anyway. So hopefully all the conversations and insights that people in the arts have been having for over a year, we can implement those into more meaningful ways. But, I'm taking it more of a, let's take it one day at a time. Let's see how the next year goes. But, a number of artists are no longer with us. A number of institutions are permanently closed. And also I think a lot of people are just saying, forget it. This is way too hard. Not interested. I think anything that was a challenge just below the surface, brought to the surface or highlighted, magnified, I guess, during the pandemic for a lot of folks. So if they had a trouble in their marriage, they're divorced. If they didn't like living in New York City, they're leaving New York City. If they don't like living or working at this job, they're like, I quit this job. I can't do it. So I think those things were not necessarily due to the pandemic. I think it's always been under the surface. It's just that the pandemic, I think for many, was the first time that people had to face the inherent fragility of life and confront the mortality of, like, we could be gone at any time.
Exactly.
And I think that's making people ask a lot of questions. Yeah.
So for everybody watching, this is Put Together Conversations. I'm your host, Daniel G. Garza. We'll be talking with dancer Brendan McCall, a good friend of mine, and we're talking about achieving your goals, going after your dreams, and what do you do when you're locked up and you still have to dance? And I hope that you've been following along. Now, this is about the time when I ask my guests to share some words of wisdom with the audience. So, Brendan McCall, what words of wisdom do you have for us?
Wow. Just words of wisdom. Go.
Yes.
Man. What can let me see. Well, one thing I could say is, well, I remember back in 2010, I had a horrible moment, personally and professionally, in the summer of 2010. And I was very depressed. I've had a few of these moments. I think I've had like 6 or 7. So when they're happening, they're awful. But when they're not happening, I'm very grateful for them because I really find out who I really am. And in 2010 was probably one of the worst. I was in a foreign country. I lost my business. I lost all my life savings. I was broke. I didn't know what to do. And for some reason, in the midst of this horrible summer, I was reading the biography of Steve Jobs. I don't know why. I don't know how I could concentrate. But there's a moment in there where Steve Jobs talks about getting fired from Apple, which he started. And later tried a few businesses that didn't work, tried some that did. And then years later, they invited him back. And then suddenly Apple is the most successful company ever. And he said, I think during a commencement speech at Stanford University, that moment of getting fired from his own company was one of the best things that ever happened to him, which sounds counterintuitive. I think, the hardship, let me put it this way. It's easy to be a successful artist when everything is going your way. It's a piece of cake. In fact, it's kind of worthless when everyone is like setting up gigs for you and like money is like being thrown at you as you puff on your cigar by the swimming pool or whatever. That's kind of easy to be a successful artist then, but I feel like the measure of what our resilience really is, how generous we can be, how kind and respectful we can be, we really see that when things are not going our way at all. And in many ways, the navigate hardship is a greater indicator of our character. So if there's one word of wisdom is just try to surround the situation with ourselves rather than let the situation surround us. I found that very helpful, as well as whatever happened. It's gone. And I don't know what will happen in the future. I do know that my mind tends to create narratives of the worst case scenario. I wish my mind did not function that way. I wish I was just eternally optimistic. But the truth is no one knows what's going to happen in the future. It's unwritten. So what kind of future do I want to be a part of? What's the kind of life I want to live? And what can I do, if anything, to participate in the experience or the construction of that positive vision of life? So, if anything, like that positive vision, it starts right now. Like, what can I do now? If I am a performing artist, have I taken care of my body today? Have I taken care of my feelings, my mind today? Am I eating good food? Am I feeding my creative imagination by reading something, listening to music, whatever it is? But like, really try to find a way to do that, rather than getting caught up in all the stuff that's really out of my control. Like, will anyone like my manuscript? Will anyone come to the show next year that I'm starting to plan now as a producer? What will my students think of me in September? All these future tripping. It's such a drain of energy, the stress. It doesn't serve me at all. I don't work harder when I'm stressed. I'm not more innovative when I'm under pressure in that way. So anything I can do to be my best ally, and I encourage my peers and my students to do the same, like wag your own tail, like as best you can. Be your own advocate, be your own ally. Because if I can't be jazzed about what I'm doing, why am I expecting the world to be excited about what I'm doing if I'm not even seemingly that interested? If I'm just, a poser of some gloomy, tortured artist, that's going to be a hard sell.
Yeah, the gloomy artist is sexy, but it doesn't get you much anywhere. So don't do that.
Totally.
Totally. We're down to the last 5 minutes before we end the show. I want to remind everybody that Little Mexican Productions, we have 3 shows on the air. So you can catch us every Wednesday with the Christian and Daniel Show at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. On Fridays, it's the Card Divo at 5 o'clock. And on Saturdays, we have 2 shows. Put it together, conversations at noon and 5. So you can catch 2 different interviews on Saturday. So set your alarms. Make sure you set your notifications to it. If you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn, you can set the reminders to make sure that you get notified. And do us a favor, if you're watching us on YouTube, will you please subscribe to our page and hit that little bell, and you'll get notified with all of the shows that come up. We have all these shows, and you will get notification of everything that pops up. Also, in case you haven't heard, because I say it at every show, Grumpy Bunny and the Colors Game is out. You can buy it on any of these 5 book outlets. Grumpy Bunny and the Colors Game, written by me and illustrated by Jennifer and Vivian Gatch. It's a story about a bunny who's grumpy, and his mom helps him through some guided meditations. So if you have a hard time meditating, or you know a child who's having a hard time meditating or concentrating, get this book for them. I'm sure they'll enjoy it. Not because I wrote it. Okay, yeah, a lot of it because I wrote it, but it's a good book. And I also, that's a good story to say hello to all the Grumpy Bunny group out there. You know who you are if you're watching the show today. All our fellow Grumpy Bunnies, you know who you are. And big hello to all y'all. Y'all definitely helped keep me sane through the lockdown. So Appreciate all you guys. Anything else before we go, Mr.?
Absolutely.
Oh, let me get up there. Here is your link. Anything else before we go?
I can't think of anything except, we're entering a new phase of our lives, of our world, and let's just make it better, more welcoming, more creative, more fun, more just, more pleasurable. I mean, it's up to us. Like, let's really do it. I mean, nothing can stop us if we can work together. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and possibility. I get really excited, not just for my peers, but also by the people younger than me, like what they're doing, what they're thinking about. And so I just hope we can make that this new phase of our history just the best ever.
Awesome. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for being on the show. I so appreciate you. And I'm excited for your next visit back down to Southern California so we can hang out again.
You got it. Absolutely.
All right. Don't go away. I'm going to put you in the green room for a second. I'll be right back for you. For everybody watching, thank you so much for watching today. I want to thank you for putting up with the technical difficulties. One of those things, let's blame it on the retrograde. But I want to thank my director and partner, Christian Ramirez, for jumping in and saving the moment. It's always good to have somebody to back you up. So again, thank you so much for watching. Remember to watch us every week, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays for all of our shows. Thank you, Brendan, for joining us. All of you, thank you for watching. Remember, Put It Together Conversations. It's a show about folks, where they come from, where they are now, and what their story is like. And the idea is to motivate and inspire other folks to go after their dreams. I hope today's story has inspired you. And if you or somebody you know wants to be on the show, please message us at any of the channels you're watching on. And join us here to share your story. For now, I want to thank all of you for watching. My name is Daniel G. Garza, and hey, put it together. See you next time. Bye-bye.